Howell and I were talking about scaling Mount Everest and how often it had been done. And Bill had just read a book about an English mountaineer, George Mallory, who disappeared on his attempt to summit Mount Everest in 1924. And I got interested in learning a little bit more about mountaineering. And since Mount Everest is the tallest mountain in the world, it is kind of the holy grail for adventurous mountaineers. Everest is 29,032 feet high. And by comparison, the tallest mountain in the Alps is 15,700 feet high. There are mountain ranges in all parts of the world, but I'm just going to talk about the Himalayan mountains. I had a map, but my friend Polly Boyle had a bigger map, so I think you can see this one better. I'm going to show you where the Himalayan mountains are. And Polly got this map when she and her husband went to visit India. And this picture over here on the piano is a picture that Polly took out of the airplane seat that she was in when they were leaving Kathmandu. That's a nice photograph of Mount Everest, and here's another one. But here, the Himalayan mountains are right through this area right here. It covers 5 different countries. Bhutan, here's China up here. This used to be, this border here was Tibet. China took over Tibet. Here's Nepal, here's India, and Pakistan is up here. And so the Himalayas are in 5 different countries up through there. Nepal, the country of Nepal, has 8 of the 14 highest peaks in the Himalayas. This little landlocked country right here, Bhutan, considers their mountains so sacred, they don't allow anybody to climb them. Mountain climbers are all in this area here. Nepal borders China, and Mount Everest is right on here on the border of China and Nepal. One side of the mountain is in China, the other side of the mountain is in Nepal. But in 1960s, Nepal and China had an agreement that they both will co-own, if you will, the summit. But both places have treks or mountain climbing expeditions. The summit of Everest is both in China and in Nepal, as I said. But both countries, China and Nepal, charge a fee to climb. It's about $11,000 for the privilege to climb. Both countries have staging areas to prepare for the climb, and both have rescue protocols in place. There are several routes to the summit, both on Nepal and China, and the climbers choose a route that best matches their skill and experience. And one thing I forgot to tell you is, whereas this is Mount Everest and the tallest mountain, the second tallest mountain is called K2, and it is up here on the border of Pakistan and China. And K2 is a lot more dangerous than Mount Everest. After paying for a permit, the cost to actually climb the mountain to the summit is about $80,000. And that doesn't include the cost of equipment and supplies and the cost of just getting there. I'm going to give you some definitions so that when I mention them again, you know what I'm talking about. A Sherpa is a native normally to the Nepal area. They and their ancestors have lived at high altitudes and low oxygen atmospheres for centuries. And they have a high tolerance for living in thin air. Research has documented that over time, their bodies have actually evolved differently from others. Once they were farmers and shepherds, and now about 100% of the able-bodied men in Nepal are employed on expeditions. Some are experienced guides, some are porters, some are cooks, but they've all learned to charge large fees for their service. We frequently mention stations. Once a route is planned, climbers need to prepare for establishing campsites along the way. A base station is where most of the supplies and equipment are held, and the base station commander is selected, and he's responsible for all the supplies, equipment, medical essentials, and is the key person for any kind of rescue protocol. The base station provides supplies, tents, and so forth for the other stations as you go up the mountain. The base station is usually established at about 5,000 feet. And then they establish additional stations like Station 4, Station 3, Station 2, Station 1. And the Station 1 is usually about roughly 800 meters from the summit. And it's called the attack station. A lot of times climbers will supply these different stations as they go along. But when they get up to the number 1 station to get ready for the assault, the protocol, usually for most people, is to go back to the lower station to rest overnight, get some rest, get some food. When you're at high altitudes, you lose your appetite. But you get some food and get some energy back so that you can make that difficult climb the next day. A trek, you usually hear the word trek, usually means an extensive hike. A guided hike can be from $2,000 to $5,000. A popular trek is to go from the staging area down low up to the base camp area, which is about 5,000 feet. The staging area used to be very remote. There were no roads. Kathmandu was the largest city near Mount Everest, and people would get to Kathmandu, but then there were no roads to get to the staging area. But now that's all changed. There are roads, there are airfields, there are helicopter pads, and it's very commercialized today. Everest was named after the British surveyor who was commissioned to survey that entire area during Britain's colonial times. Most people say Everest. That's what I say, it's Everest, like 3 syllables almost. But some people say Everest. But the man it was named after said his name was Everest. Mount Everest is the highest and the big attraction for many countries to finance an expedition. To reach the summit first and bring prestige to the country supporting the expedition, Britain tried vigorously. In 1921, 1922, they wanted to be the first country to get to the summit of Mount Everest. They were not successful. They tried again in 1924 with some very experienced climbers. This fellow by the name of George Mallory had scaled many of the Alps and had a lot of practice experience. But oxygen canisters were first used in 1922. And so he tried to use oxygen canisters when he tried to climb again in 1924. He and his friend, climbing friend, were last spotted about 800 feet from the summit, and then they disappeared. It is still a debate as to whether they were going up or coming down. Britain really wanted to certify that they had reached the top, but they never could do that. Some of their equipment was found. They were lost in 1924. Some of their equipment was found in 1999. No bodies, but some of the equipment showed their maps and some of their notes, but nothing, no cameras, nothing that really said that they got to the top. Mallory was once asked, "Why do you want to climb Mount Everest?" And he said, "Because it's there." That kind of paraphrases an old comment. You remember John Dillinger, the gangster? Somebody asked him one time, said, why do you rob banks? He said, because that's where the money is. Edmund Hillary of New Zealand and his Sherpa were the first to summit Mount Everest in May of 1953. They stayed only 15 minutes because they were low on oxygen and had to come back. At last count that I have, it's probably more than this now, there have been 12,884 ascents of Mount Everest. By comparison, K2 that I mentioned has been topped about 800 times. Mountaineers have to plan a route, select equipment, and plan their diet to get maximum strength, to get red corpuscles in their blood to carry more oxygen. They carry oxygen canisters, which are necessary but are a burden to carry. Reaching the peak is a team effort. Maybe two will reach the peak after a whole team is involved in the climb. The second highest mountain, K2, has been nicknamed Savage Mountain because it tries to kill you. And it is far more dangerous than Everest. Very unpredictable, few routes, frequent landslides, unpredictable weather changes. In 1986, 13 people died on the way down from K2. They keep a funny statistics on both mountains. The statistics reads like this. The death rate for Everest is one death for 160 summits. At K2, it's one death for every 4 summits. Mountaineers are special people. They all have different reasons for climbing, and it's for the sport, the thrill, or the danger, a hobby, a challenge. They want to accomplish something and conquer a challenge. Many mountaineers climb a mountain and then climb it again just to go by a different route. There are thousands of peaks in the world that have not been scaled. There's a mountain in Antarctica has never even been attempted. Several Russian mountains have never been scaled. Now, some of you know about a Kingsport losing a very promising young man to a Himalayan mountain in India. Valerie and Carl Ketron and their son Chip was introduced to mountain climbing when, as a teenager, he attended a Boy Scout jamboree in Idaho. And part of that program was sort of an introduction to mountain climbing. And he knew after he did that he just simply wanted to climb more mountains. As a student at UT, majoring in philosophy, he continued to get experience in mountain climbing. Before he was 22 years old, he had climbed 4 mountains in California and Washington State, including Mount Rainier and Mount Shasta. He attended 4 different climbing schools. The summer of his junior year at UT, he went on several trips to Kashmir and Pakistan and met a bunch of people in the India area. This is a picture of Chip when he was about 22 years old. He was interviewed in 1977 by the Kingsport Times News. And he announced at that time that he was starting his own travel agency. And this is one of his business cards. Chip Ketron, Director, International Treks and Travel. And he was delighted doing this before he was ever out of college. He mentioned that he had a preference for the Indian Himalayas, that part of the world. He'd been to Kashmir on other trips. He knew a number of people in India. And in his interview, he told of an incident one time when he was traveling in was a large group in Kashmir. A porter that was along with them had brought his donkey along to help carry the burden. The donkey slipped and was about to fall into a crevasse. The porter tried to help the donkey out, and they both fell into the crevasse. This is a picture of Chip looking into a crevasse. You see this opening in the snow? That probably wasn't there yesterday. It can appear overnight. And it can be a few feet deep, it can be 100 or 1,000 feet deep. But you can see how slippery it is. He's standing there on the edge of the cat. He said that they had a search party for the Sherpa and the donkey, but they never found them, and he didn't know if they ever did find them. But while he was still a college student, Chip delighted in giving talks and showing slides to civic clubs and to his philosophy classmates. He knew that most of his audiences would never see the sights that he had seen. Being a philosophy major, he was particularly interested in the culture and the philosophy of the mountain people. In the Scandinavian country, in the 5 countries having Himalayan mountains, the people considered the mountains sacred, and they built monasteries in very remote places. They meditate for 12 hours or so a day, and you can see them walking around carrying, there's some prayer beads that Chip brought back. They walk around many hours a day, figuring these beads and saying prayers. And we may think it's strange that these people think their mountains are so sacred, but to us, we probably seem strange to them. And mysterious as they are. They may think it's strange that some of us think the sign of the cross is sacred, or that Jews think the Star of David is sacred, or that Muslims think that Mecca is a sacred place. But to them, they really do honor their mountains. And Chip found this fascinating. He was as fascinating with the people and the culture as he was with the mountains themselves. And I think as a young man, Chip found a need to move, to see landscapes, cities, cultures, and a need for adventure, and a need to share these experiences. Early in 1978, he and a friend, Brad Shaver from Asheville, who was an instructor and a guide in the Outward Bound program, they climbed 5 mountains in the French Alps, including Mont Blanc, which is the highest mountain in the Alps. Brad joined Chip in his travel company. In October 1978, they visited a friend in India who also owned a travel company. They discussed the possibility of a merger and how they might help each other in the future in the travel business. The friend encouraged him to visit a place called the Nanda Devi Sanctuary. It's in northwest India. This other little mark right here is the Nanda Devi Sanctuary, right on the border, not right on the border, but very near the border. It's a sacred place to them. We would probably call it a national park. The sanctuary is surrounded by a number of tall mountains. It has gorgeous, stunning views of valleys, unusual wildlife, alpine meadows, glaciers, steep mountain faces, and some of the most beautiful scenery in the Himalayas. There are a group of several mountains on the north side, known as the sanctuary wall. The highest peak in the sanctuary wall is called Mount Donagiri. This is 2 pictures of Mount Donagiri. This is the mountain that Chip and his friend were planning to climb. Mount Donagiri is 23,184 feet high. Donagiri has panoramic views, making it a prime objective for mountaineers. Chip and Brad had to get permission from the Indian government to to climb Oddities. Oddities was first climbed by a Swiss expedition in 1939 and not again until 1975 by a British expedition. Chip and Brad were the first Americans to climb it, and the first to climb it by the Southwest Ridge. Southwest Ridge had been avoided mostly because it seemed to be more dangerous. There are no easy climbs. There's rock climbing, there's snow and ice climbing, and technically demanding wherever you go. High winds, low temperatures, an ice wall can weigh 100 tons if it were to collapse. Their expedition involved a party of 9 people. Chip and Brad were the only 2 that were planning to climb to the apex, to the summit. Their support team included 2 high altitude Sherpas, 3 cooks and porters, and a major at the base camp was part of the official Indian government. October 18, 1978, 9:30 a.m. They climbed to the summit. And this is another picture of Oddities, and shows, you can see Chip here in the background. He's getting ready to climb Mount Oddities. And they did. And they had a prearranged signal at 6:30 in the evening to show a flashlight. They didn't have cell phones or radios back in those days. But that flashlight, when they showed it, after they had been to the summit, told the people down below, all's well. The next day, October 20th, no sign of the climbers. A search team was organized to search for them. October 21st, searchers found a knapsack at the edge of a crevasse. They could not descend into the crevasse. The knapsack was Chip's. The straps were broken like it had been ripped off his back. October 21st, extensive search, helicopters revealed no signs of them. Late at night, Valerie and Carl got a phone call from the United States State Department reporting their disappearance. This was 10 days after they had disappeared. And I remember when Carl and Valerie's brother, Bill Green, left here to get permission to go to India and check on the search and see how well it was going and probably do some searching themselves. But it was unrest in the world at that time, and to just get permission to go took some doing. They first got in touch with Jimmy Quillen, our state representative. Quillen got in touch with Senator Howard Baker, who in turn got in touch with President Jimmy Carter. And they went through all the rigmarole to get approval to get their passports done. And finally, the Secretary of State, Cyrus Vance, cleared their passports for them, and they went to Indian authorities to see how well they had done the search, and they wanted to do some of their own searching. After major searches by them and by the Indian authorities, no evidence was found. Bad weather came in, minus 40 degrees, winds 60 to 80 miles an hour. The Kiwanis Club remembered Chip, his talks and slides, which he loved to do, and they did a special program honoring his memory. Chip's girlfriend organized some of his slides and prepared a narrative that went along with the slides, and it was shown at Bays Mountain for 6 weeks. The philosophy department at UT established a lecture in his memory. The Indian Mountaineers Foundation placed a plaque at the summit of Oddities, commemorating their feat. Some of his writings and observations were in the UT publications, and other contributions in his honor came from many places in Kingsport. At a very early age, Chip found what he really wanted to do. A friend once said, in Chip's soft, easy way, he said, there is but one way to live, and that is to do what you feel will enrich your life and that of your friends. Valerie has hundreds of slides that we're going to look and see if we can put them together with the narrative that was used at Bays Mountain. And we're going to work on that, and she's already started it. Now let me tell you a few odd things about mountaineering. Some of these things, there has been a death on Everest every year since 1978. 280 climbers have been lost there and never found. The first solo climb was August of 1980. The first to reach the summit without oxygen was an Italian by the name of Messner in 1978. Messner was also the first person to climb all 26,000 peaks without oxygen. He carried his own gear. He didn't use Sherpas. He would spend a month acclimatizing before he would make an effort. Now over 216 have summited Everest without oxygen. To do so means a slow climb, which means risking brain damage, frostbite, and snow blindness. In 2001, a blind American, Everett Wittenmanger, summited Everest, and he had previously summited Mount Kilimanjaro, and he was blind then too. Two women have reached the summit. There are probably more now since I had this data. Two women reached the summit, one a Chinese and one a Japanese. On one Japanese expedition, the entire crew was all women. The first wintertime ascent was in 1993, also by a Japanese team. In 1970, a Japanese man made a documentary of himself skiing down Everest. He won an Academy Award for his film. In May of 2013, he again was the oldest man to summit Mount Everest. The Japanese woman, a Japanese woman, was the oldest woman to summit, and she did it in 2002 when she was 63 years old. Then in 2012, she did it again at age 73. In 1996, a Swedish band bicycled from Sweden to Nepal, organized an expedition and reached the summit, and then he bicycled back to Sweden. In 2000, a complete, uninterrupted ski descent from the summit was by a Slovenian. A year later, a Frenchman did a snowboard descent down Mount Everest. Sounds pretty easy now, doesn't it? And just think they had to carry the skis and the snowboard up the mountain before they could come down. The United States funded a very expensive expedition in 1963. The United States expedition involved 900 porters, 26 tons of food, clothing, and equipment, and it took 5 weeks of planning. On May the 1st of 1963, they established a series of camps on the mountains. On May 1st, James Whittaker and 2 Sherpas were the Americans to reach the summit. On May 22, 4 other Americans reached the summit and made history by ascending the West Ridge, which had been considered unclimbable. 2 others reached the summit by different routes. Of that group of Americans that went, 6 suffered frostbite, 2 lost their toes. Early climbers frequently lost toes, fingers, and even sometimes noses. But in July of that year, President Kennedy presented them all with a medal. The average time on the summit is a few minutes. One Sherpa was able to stay 21 hours. Another Sherpa has made the summit 28 times. The average time from a base camp to the summit is 5 days. One Sherpa holds the record for the fastest summit to the summit, 10 hours and 56 minutes. From a 5-day average to a 10-hour trip. Today there are well-marked trails, secure routes, and something that's very modern going on in Nepal today. The Nepal government has contracted with a Japanese company to supply heavy-duty drones to carry equipment and so forth up the mountain. These drones will lift 200 pounds at sea level or at low levels, but in that thin atmosphere, it can only lift 100 pounds. Yet they've actually carried thousands of pounds now up the mountain by drone, and even have carried warm breakfasts to some of the climbers. Not only that, a thing that's been bothering them for some time is the trash that's been accumulating on the mountain. There's food, cans, bottles, plastic, discarded tents, discarded equipment of all sorts, and they're using these drones now to haul the trash back down from the mountain. So far, they brought 6,000 pounds of trash down by drone. Sometimes there are long waiting lines just to climb the mountain. You spend a lot of money to get there, and maybe you have a 5-day window to do your climb. And if that window closes for weather or rescue or whatever operations, you lose your place in line and no refund. You don't get a refund on the permits you paid for, or the gear that you bought, or your expenses of getting there. With global warming, major landslides are more prevalent now than ever. Granite is warming after being frozen for centuries. Ice walls are thinning and releasing. New crevasses are forming. Mountains are more dangerous today, including the Himalayas, the Andes, the Alps, the Rockies, all of them. But all these dangers exist along with the physical toll of a mountaineer. It takes months of planning, every detail, supplies, equipment, clothing. They have to buy ultra-expensive boots, ultra-expensive sleeping bags, and many spend an extra month just acclimatizing to get used to it. Coming down is the most dangerous time that the climbers are facing. They're tired, they're hungry, and they're trying to get in a hurry and make bad decisions. Focus still should be on survival, not just finding a path. I've learned mountain climbing is not for me. And before we adjourn and go to our, Amanda has something to say, and then Tyler wants to say something too.
Thank you all for coming. We do have a luau after this. We would like.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Jack, for a great presentation. We have a luau after this. Everybody is welcome. And I did record this, so it will be a link on YouTube. I will send the link out on the newsletter.
You don't have to get to it.
All I want to say is thank you for this wonderful program. Thank you for including my son, Chip Caper. He was a very smart, ambitious young man. And
He's for Mrs.
yes, and I want to introduce my microphone. I want to introduce my family who's here. This is all my family. My brother Bill Green, his wife Linda, and my grandson Will, and my grandson Mitchell, and Katie, my granddaughter. That's all of us.
of you will join us in the luau here.